Welcome everybody, I'm Tom.
I'm Lloyd.
And welcome to PodConnaissance.
Hopefully you enjoy the show.
Thank you. I was looking at like cheap monitors. It looks like I'm actually going to have to buy expensive ones, but the cheap ones I was looking at, it was like $90. But the actual...
What do you want a cheap monitor for?
I didn't. I was just looking at new monitors. Because
I
want to
get
at
the moment, do you?
Yeah, but I want to get them at a higher resolution. I want to get like 1440 monitors rather than 1080.
Oh, you've only got 1080 at the moment.
Yep.
Can they go higher than 1440 now?
Yeah, you can get like 4K now pretty easily.
Yeah.
You can get 8K monitors, but they're like 10 grand each. Not quite, but they're still ridiculous.
Isn't there also 10K?
There is, but they're like...
is it just like testing grounds?
Well, I think 10K is technically ultra-wide. So they're like these ridiculously really wide monitors. So it's like you've got two in one, essentially.
So is it just like 8K stretched?
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's like 10K technically, but it's just like, it's the same height as 8K, it's just stretched. So it's not exactly
widescreen.
Directly, yeah.
Cool.
I think it's called ultra widescreen. It's like the most ridiculous.
Ultra widescreen.
Like if you're sitting like, yeah, it has to be far enough away from you because you have to actually turn to look at the side of the screen. Like it's pretty ridiculous.
Curved TVs and monitors are pretty popular.
These ones are curved as well, actually. The ultra wide ones, they go like this, but they're like this fucking wide, like they're insane. And they sort of curve around slightly. To
me, it only makes like the bigger the TV or the bigger the screen, that would be a good reason to have it curved. Because if it's a small screen, it's curved. You're not what's the effect that you're going to gain?
Yeah, I don't really know.
I imagine if you're sitting really close and you've got a big screen, it curves around. It sort of feels like you're wearing almost like a helmet.
Mm-hmm. You can do like sort of simulation and stuff. So you could have like in-car cockpit and that kind of stuff. Maybe, I don't know.
But for standard like movies, like blockbuster movies, whatever.
Yeah, I mean a lot of them, it's not going to make a huge amount of difference. I mean, I saw that there was one at there was a tech expo that was on recently, but they had, I think it was LG came out with this thing where you hit a button and it curves your TV, so you can have it flat or curved.
What? So the TV
it literally mechanically bends.
Really?
Yep.
How much is that?
I don't know. I don't even know if it was released yet. I think it was because this is like this is like tech demo shit where they're like it's their new shit. But
sort of like when you go to the car shows and they're like the concept cars of the future, and you see
exactly. And it's the stuff that'll be coming out the next couple of years, pretty much.
Yeah, like an Aston Martin 4x4.
Yeah, exactly.
That type of stuff.
Yeah. Well, they do it with cars a lot. I think they tend to do it like 5 years in advance.
They do a lot. I know. Lamborghini years ago showed the SUV, which has now come out.
Yep.
Aston Martin and Rolls-Royce demoed it, like an SUV. Ford brought back the Bronco. Yeah. But it's
Rolls-Royce SUV would be just seems strange.
So it looks basically the same as a Phantom, like the front's all the same from memory, but then imagine putting the front of like a Phantom Rolls-Royce onto the back end of a Range Rover. I think that's...
I mean, to be fair, Rolls are like pretty ridiculously beefy in the first place. They almost, like, they're all thick and chunky, so they almost all look like bloody four-wheel drives anyway.
Have you seen...
Except for the form factor is lower.
Yeah, have you seen the special features they come with inside the door?
Oh
frame?
Yeah, like they've got like an umbrella and like the door frame and stuff like that.
Press it, pops out. It's pretty
It is. Rad. It's like it's the true fancy shit that you expect when you're paying for a Rolls Royce, I suppose.
Yeah, paying lots and lots of money.
Indeed. I think that's almost the point of a Rolls Royce, right? Is to show how much money you've got.
Yeah, definitely show off the money you've got. The one cool thing I've definitely seen that I'm sort of envious of is it's like a Galaxy, instead of having like a what are they called, like a sunroof.
Yep.
It's things like a Galaxy planetarium roof. So it has like thousands of tiny little LEDs, which looks like constellations.
Yep.
On the ceiling, which look pretty epic.
How often are you going to be using it though?
So I don't know if I assume the feature could be turned on and off, but I don't know if it's like.
But the idea being that you get better light because you have like a bunch of LEDs, so you can get like a good light as opposed to like a skylight, presumably. I don't know.
No, it actually looks like if I show a photo.
So it's designed as an actual.
I don't know if it's
not planetarium, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'll show you a photo. I'll link it in the. We'll link it in the video.
Yep.
Let's have a look.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
See, that's what I mean.
Huh. Fair enough.
Starlight roof.
Yeah, so it's the idea being that it's kind of like you're driving at night, like at night under like a clear sky or whatever. It's interesting.
I have no idea what the purpose. I don't understand the purpose really. I think it's
Yeah,
just
not
like
really. Like it's
because they can.
Well, exactly, I suppose. But it's like an inventive way to do lighting, I suppose. Like rather than having like a center light, maybe you can turn them up brighter. So if you need lights on the car, you can turn them up and actually.
I assume
see
it's
properly.
supposed to be like bespoke.
Mhm.
Like a bespoke feature, something that sets them apart.
Yeah. Well.
Like if it's like supercar level money.
Yeah.
So why would you get
Probably
a Rolls
more
Royce?
than that for Rolls, right?
Yeah, I think it's like $1 million.
Yeah, they're pretty ridiculous.
Having
said that, I mean, like, supercars are kind of up there as well. Sports cars and supercars are kind of that price. What's the cheapest? Like a Lambo, probably?
Cheapest sports car?
Well, not sports car, but like sort of ridiculous high-end.
Well,
because Murcielago is like, what, 600 grand or something?
I think so. Well, that's what it used to be, I believe.
Mm.
But you can get a 911 turbo.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
GTS, what I think they're GTS now.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there's I guess
for a lot less.
And like an Audi R8s and stuff.
Yeah, you get
on the order
Audi
of like,
R8s, but yeah, a lot of like the Audis, Porsches, you can get at the lower end, but the capability is amazing.
Yeah.
The stuff, if you're going supercar, then it's more about like the flamboyance, like
that's true.
Like Lamborghini,
get a
Ferrari, Pagani, Huayra.
Mm-hmm. The kind of ones that people spit in it when they walk past.
Yeah,
you never want to leave the roof down on any of a convertible.
I'd definitely love to sit in a Pagani.
Mm.
Apparently their steering wheels, like the stalks, and a lot of the buttons and the switches are made of magnesium.
Magnesium, huh? I guess it's fairly light.
Very expensive.
Yeah. It's odd that they would use that over carbon fiber. I guess magnesium would be lighter than carbon fiber, I guess.
But then that's why your cockpit looks like that.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane. You definitely blow money, insane amounts of money, because you want something that looks like that. Mm-hmm. That's why you get a supercar.
Yeah, that's true.
Or
what's that, Huayra?
Pagani Huayra.
That's like the newer one, right?
I think Huayra is the newest one, unless they've got they might have brought out like a special edition Zonda.
Zonda, yeah. Because Zonda was it was almost like ubiquitous when you say.
Yeah, that was like
Pagani. It was like Pagani Zonda.
Yeah, yeah.
Because it was like their flagship car that everyone knew about.
But yeah, so I think there's the categories. If you go through the categories, I think it's sports car, supercar, and then like hypercar. Mm-hmm. And a hypercar would be.
They're kind of the ones that are designed for performance over luxury, right?
I don't know. I don't know if it's supposed to be both.
Maybe. I always think of, like, when I hear hypercar, I always think of, like, the cars where they've taken out the seat rails because they weigh too much. And, like...
But then a lot of these cars are like that.
Yeah, I guess that's true as well.
Yeah, not all of them, but a lot of them are very similar.
Yeah.
But I think when I think of hypercar, I think of the McLaren, the electric engine, and
they're like road
petrol.
Versions of racing cars, essentially.
Sort of.
But as well, you've got also like what was the one recently where the seat didn't go back and forward, instead the steering wheel came forward and the pedals came forward to meet you?
Oh, was that the Aston Martin?
Might have been. I can't remember specifically. I'll look it up. I'll put a note in
the Aston Martin Vulcan.
Yeah, maybe. It may be like a new thing that a few of them have done, but I remember like that would scare the shit out of me. If you, instead of like. You imagine if that, like, you accidentally engage that when you're driving, the wheel just goes...
Yeah, I can imagine, but I assume they'd have a feature where once the engine's engaged,
started, you can't do it, maybe.
Drive,
yeah.
It'd lock the system.
Maybe.
Well, because I assume most of these systems, because they're electronic, they work off, like, software
Mm-hmm.
to save not only on like material
Which is
weight,
somewhat
but-
terrifying how much a lot of new cars are running off software, because it makes them so much more hackable.
Well, that's what is it? What's his name? Elon Musk is always
Well, yeah, he's worried
going
about
on
that kind of stuff.
Well,
yeah.
he always stresses more about the AI
Mm-hmm.
and how, in his opinion, unless it's controlled properly and you make, I can't remember the way he's described. It's not like a closed-end system, but the way if you're making things like cars and machinery which you have control over, then artificial intelligence in that aspect isn't seen as dangerous.
No.
But when you're making like
But that's
human
it's the classic. I think
replicates-
the game Mass Effect probably did the best way of differentiating it. Is they had, this is all sort of fantasy
Yeah.
sci-fi bullshit, but the actual concept makes kind of sense. They had virtual intelligences, which were like what we consider artificial intelligence these days, where you've got things like a computer that will sort of intuitively come up with things and give you information and things like that, like a help desk or something like that. That's virtual reality, like a bot or something.
Yep.
And then they had AI, which was something that was to the point where it could essentially self-replicate and create itself. Now,
Yep.
I don't think Elon Musk isn't talking about that far, but it's the same kind of differentiation where you've got something where humans essentially control it. They just give it a bunch of parameters that it can use to find things out without us telling it literally everything.
Yep.
Whereas AIs
Well,
that
once
he's
it's
worried
born-
about are the ones that are, for all intents and purposes, conscious things.
Yep.
They're the kind of things that can make decisions.
Yeah, so they're programmed to continue to learn.
Yes.
And then like
They're programmed.
widen their-
They're programmed to the point where they could end their own constraints, essentially.
Yeah.
But whether or not that's anywhere close to being developed is hard to say, and whether it's even possible to be developed, I think, is still in slight contention.
Yeah. Well, which is something differently to worry about. But then I heard 2 days ago, in passing, on I think it was like a podcast or someone had told me about Stephen Hawking, and he had some sort of end of the world prediction
Mm-hmm.
at like set at 500 years from now, and apparently he revised that just before he passed away.
Interesting.
Supposedly he revised it to like a century. I don't know if it's
Like
true.
a world-ending event in a
Yeah,
century,
there'd be a world-ending event in a century, but I think the message was that it was self-inflicted,
yeah,
as in like the human race.
as I can imagine.
Yeah,
I mean, what's the alternative? Like we have like a natural disaster that's going to take us out. That's likely going to be tens to hundreds of millions of years in the future. Like when we have sun
to have
expanding
that,
and
to that
or
size, yeah, having
huge
that size
asteroid impact
event,
or something like that. Like the chances of that happening is millions of years. It's far more likely that we continue growing to the point where we can't sustain ourselves.
What, haven't we already hit that point
Pretty much.
in reality? If you
I
think about it.
mean, there was actually a very interesting. I can't remember his name, unfortunately, but I'll look it up and link it. But there was a guy who he did a lot of population modeling, and his theory was, because there was a lot of people saying we're going to continue to have population growth, and then we're going to hit a point where we're just not going to be able to live. But his prediction is we're actually going to stop growing at about 20 billion people. Now, you can make the argument that we may not be able to sustain 20 billion people, but he reckons it's actually going to plateau at about 20 billion people. And the reason is because
the amount of people being born and dying.
well, it's not so much
Evens
that.
out.
It's more, well, essentially, but the reason for that is the fact that when people become more affluent, they have less children. The people who have the most children in the world are people in Africa who are having
you need them to
10
help
children,
them
because
work
also because
Disease.
there's a good chance that
Yeah.
5-year kids are going to die. So it's both evolutionary and socially designed that if you're in a situation where there's a good chance your kids are going to die before they're 3 years old, then you have a culture where people have more children. And you can see this in like China.
Yeah,
Well, China
I've heard
had
of
the
it.
one-child policy that was implemented, but you've got other countries similar to China where they have a booming middle class, and now most families are having 1 or 2 kids, sometimes 3. And before that, they were having a shit ton of kids because It was just the culture of doing so.
Well,
So the idea,
two kids sound makes sense. If you go
It
to
does,
if you're living in a Western society and you're going out for dinner or whatever, so getting a table for 4 people, getting a table for 5 people or 7, it's not
impractical.
It's impractical now. So that's interesting.
But essentially, he did a bunch of modeling and things. He actually he had a lecture series that was on TV about that actually, which was quite interesting. But
is this the guy from that Dan Brown movie, Inferno?
I don't know.
You know, with Professor Langdon.
Oh right, yeah.
Tom Hanks.
Tom Hanks. Oh right, because that was
the guy, the evil billionaire.
It's been a long time since I've read those books.
Because
it was like there was the Da Vinci Code and there was Angels and Demons.
Yeah, Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons, and then Inferno.
Inferno, right.
And supposedly, not supposedly, in Inferno, in the movie at least, the evil baddie was I can't remember his exact title, but he was a scientist that did population prediction, and his whole rant was that we had gone beyond sustainability, so now it's time to cull.
That does sound vaguely familiar. It's kind of standard megalomaniac evil scientist, but
well, it's like Thanos.
Essentially,
the same principle.
Except, well, spoilers for Avengers. But the problem I had with Thanos, right, is he had the power, like god power, to wipe out half the. Why didn't he just double the resources?
Because he's an evil villain, and that plays better for.
I suppose, but that was the thing though. That movie did a really good job of providing that he wasn't really like a true villain, right?
Well, if he had have done that, then but imagine all the little kids going to see Avengers and then like coming home and they're conflicted and they're like can't go to sleep because they're wrestling with.
I guess that's true, but was something that I gave
the more
that
realistic nature of a villain being close to someone you can actually understand.
Well, exactly, and they did that quite well. Because, I mean, it's hard to do that in comic book settings, right?
Well,
because comic book settings are usually pretty black and white. There's the evil guy and the good guy.
Which is, I think they try to keep that the same for movies. But when I started watching the, Infinity War, at the beginning, I didn't relate, but I could understand Thanos, and it's sort of. He didn't seem insane and like the ultimate evil bad guy. At the end, you can see it more.
Yeah.
But if they maintained, as you said, that type of understanding, and you gave him,
they made him a sympathetic villain.
Definitely.
Not someone you would necessarily agree with, but you at least understand where he's coming from. It's not just I'm gonna do this because I hate people or something. Or I'm evil, more ha 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 ha.
Well, he was very sympathetic, and then the point where he became less sympathetic was when he said he enjoyed it, and they put that into the mix.
Yeah. Which I guess is probably true of most, like, megalomaniacs, but whatever.
I don't know. I'm not a psychologist.
Indeed. Talking about Elon Musk as a segue.
It's a great segue.
Well, you had talking about it. Just reminded me because of SpaceX.
And now for Elon Musk.
Well, we had very recently Donald Trump has actually said that he's gonna start up their space program again, like properly, and have proper funding for it. Which is
the Space Force.
Yeah.
Fucking idiot.
Really?
It's called no.
Well, I mean,
the way he presented it.
I understand what you mean there. That was goofy as fuck. But like.
Let's call it the Space Force.
To be fair, he was saying, we've got the Air Force, we'll have the Space Force. I don't think it was something that he planned out and thought, this is what we're going to call it. I think it was just in the heat of the moment, someone was asking what he meant by it. And he's like, well, it's like the Air Force.
Yeah, which I have no issue against.
Yeah, neither.
Well, the issue I have with that, to be honest,
the fact that it's militaristic is probably necessary, but I think America is part of the something or other accords. There was something about there's no militaristic, like no no WMDs from space or that kind of thing. Was the point that was supposed to be for all these people who signed it. But a lot of the other things you were saying in there were really good, like the fact that he wanted to restart all their space programs, and he wanted to make sure that they're not falling behind like Russia and China in space programs, and they wanted to get people back on the moon by 2020 and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I
agree.
I agree. I
the
sort
Space
of
Force was a dumb thing to say.
I agree with what he was saying there, but the biggest issue I have with it was the way he came out and presented it. I'm like, what
but
he was
that's
saying.
true with everything that Donald Trump does.
Yeah, but he had.
He wasn't elected because of his eloquence. Let's be honest.
No, it's not about being eloquent, but it was a good idea. So why wouldn't you do the prep work and come out and present it properly and be like, oh, how about we do a Space Force?
I suppose. But again, to be fair, the Space Force thing was a reply to a question that he got. It wasn't like part of his presentation per se. Essentially, he was asked like to be more specific, and he said it'd be similar to like we have an Air Force and we would also have a Space Force, but they would be separate entities.
Well, they have NASA, so...
Sure, but the point he was making is he wanted something that was more over-encompassing, because NASA is essentially a science program. And he was saying they wanted something... Yeah, but
it's still a government program. You can just modify it.
That's true, you could. And it already has been. Like, it was downscaled huge under the Obama administration. Like, they don't even fly spacecraft out of NASA anymore.
No, because...
If you want to go out, you go up through Russia.
Yeah, it was too expensive. It was Russia, and there's one other site in China. I just started reading Endurance. The book Endurance by the astronaut... I'll have to Google his name because I can't remember. Apologies.
Yeah. But the other thing I was talking about doing is he also talked about lifting, or at least reviewing regulations into commercial space flights.
Scott Kelly,
that's the one.
Yeah, so I was reading his book. Sorry to cut you off.
No,
but in the book, it described a bit how NASA's been brought back. And
well,
now,
it's been downsized hugely.
Yeah, lots of budget cuts, downsized, and now the only place they can fly out of is Russia, and China has...
Yeah, both of them are the main ones that have space programs. So
that's about it. Yeah. We're going to get a space program soon.
We are, yeah. Victoria, specifically.
Where, really?
Apparently, yeah. It's a Victorian government thing, apparently. They're doing from what I was reading, I could be wrong. It could just be a federal thing based in Victoria, which would make more sense to me. But from what I was reading, it seemed like, at least in the article I was reading...
Parks. Is it Parks still?
Yeah, maybe. Can't remember.
But where would you shoot off a rocket in Victoria?
There's probably a few places in rural Victoria you could do space launching.
To me, it would have made more sense like Western Australia or South Australia, where it's just like nothing around.
True, but that's also harder to get jobs for people to do it. Like if you want to get scientists and engineers to go out and work in Western Australia, it's a harder effort to actually pull them out. You have to pay them more and all that kind of shit.
Yeah, I think of that, but then if you're...
As far as actually like space launching and stuff, I agree. It would make more sense to do it in like Central Australia or like Western Australia.
But if you're an engineer and someone goes, do you want to work for a space agency?
That's like... It's a pretty good pull, I'll be honest.
That's like cool. The top of the... It's like an athlete being asked to be an Olympian.
Yeah.
In my mind.
Yeah, I kind of agree.
Like if I was asked to come...
You can be a rocket scientist.
If I was asked to come podcast from the Space Centre, Victoria, I'd be like, yes, thank you, where do I sign?
Indeed. Well, that was the other thing that Trump did, was he was talking about reviewing the regulations into commercial space flights. So you could have people like SpaceX and... Was there Richard Branson in Virgin Air or something wanted to do it as well?
SpaceX, Richard Branson... And there's another one, Branson's for Virgin Air. And then there's... there
was another one.
The richest man in the world. What's his name?
Can't remember. There was another like space agency, right, that was doing it.
Yeah,
it's like SpaceX is Elon Musk's, right?
Yeah, Elon Musk, SpaceX. Virgin Air is Richard Branson.
And Richard Branson's is more... It's like... Not talking about commercial stuff so much as... It's like almost touristy, like what he was discussing.
Jeff Bezos.
Yep.
Or Bezos.
Bezos?
I think it's Bezos. I say Bezos.
But essentially those three companies were being hampered by American law because it was saying, well, you can't do any space things. But then at the same time they were saying, we're not going to do any space things either.
Blue Origin.
Sounds similar. So apparently others as well. Because Virgin Galactic, that was what it was called.
Oh, okay.
Was Richard Branson's.
So Google is saying there's 6 at the moment.
Interesting.
SpaceX, Orbital Sciences.
I just want to point out that this is on www.space.com.
This is
Clearly reputable source.
It's a primary source.
I mean, clearly,
reputable.
it's the official website for space.
Space.com. Orbital Sciences, I think I just said that. Blue Origin. Bigelow Airspace.
Never even heard of that one.
Virgin Galactic.
Galactic, that's the Virgin one.
That was 6. Was that 6?
I don't think so.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're missing one.
Should probably go to the next page and click and see a bunch more ads, probably.
Oh, I think this little one down here, Space Dev Sierra Nevada Corporation.
Interesting. Fair enough. But it's the idea of actually putting infrastructure into space is a good idea. And particularly the idea of...
It makes sense for us to do it.
Yeah.
Because the amount of land resource we have for
that's also
open
true.
space. And we
both
already,
us and the US.
And we already assist NASA and the other space agencies with our satellite tracking.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
Communications. And we've done that since we did that for the moon landings.
Yeah. So pretty much late 60s, early 70s we've been doing that. Or probably even from the mid 60s, I would say.
Yeah, so we've helped from the very beginning, so to speak. So that definitely makes sense. And I know there's a company in Sydney, I'll have to add the link later, who has made the world's largest 3D printer. I think they're in Sydney, or Byron Bay. Basically, they made the world's largest 3D printer to print parts for like spaceships and aircraft. So
I saw a really cool 3D printer actually. It 3D prints metal, which is really cool. Essentially, it does it via it turns
you mean
it melts
a CNC machine. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, it melts the metal and turns it into a spray essentially, and sprays it onto a plate. It's really weird and cool.
What type of metal they use?
I can't remember. I think the one I saw was printed with
Aluminum.
Aluminum. I think it was doing aluminium, but that was simply because it's an easier metal to melt.
Easier and cheaper at the moment.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that was for prototyping purposes.
Vibranium. Well, interesting. So I know, yeah, there's actually more companies popping up now, private companies in Australia looking to jump in on the action.
And that's the other thing Trump was saying in this press conference he gave. He was talking about giving some more funding to NASA, but also allowing NASA to team up with private companies, which thus far hasn't been said what private companies.
To be honest, it makes sense.
Because you can't cost it otherwise.
It's just delaying what's going to happen in the future. It's like if we don't, we could speed up the process, or eventually it's going to happen at some point.
Sure, but at the same time, given the current economic climate, do you really think the average person in America is going to be okay with spending like billions and billions of dollars on a space program?
Well,
the rich probably don't give a shit.
If you think, like, they may not at a first glance, but as things become more automated, more and more jobs are going to disappear.
That is true.
So people are going to have to find jobs in other areas. So if you can retrain people to work in things like space, well, not necessarily in space, but on space projects. In like
astronautical kind of jobs, yeah.
Yeah, even if they were a truck driver, they can now do the logistics for transporting stuff to space stations back and forth. There are other jobs, because if people just keep turning their nose up to the future, when things that we've relied on for so long begin to disappear, then, well, everyone's going to be caught holding their dick in their hand.
And a lot of the time, even with a lot of automation, increasing automation doesn't necessarily get rid of jobs, because it often creates new jobs.
Yeah.
But like
technicians and whatnot.
I mean, even like you look back, like blacksmith isn't a thing now, but there's a lot of jobs.
Well, ironically, it is.
I guess that's true, actually.
But not for the reason you'd think. It's become more of a creative outlet. So a lot of the articles I've read that discuss the movement towards automation believe that our saviour the human being's saviour is moving into more creative jobs, because robots can't replicate that type of creativity. art, poetry, writing, handmade things.
But see, at the same time, that is incumbent on having an affluent society, which I guess, if you have more automation, technically could theoretically make you more affluent just by definition.
Yeah,
or at least it seems to.
It's a giant jigsaw puzzle. There's multiple moving pieces. It's not just one thing. A lot of things have to happen for that to move forward.
Yeah.
And a lot of people say that's one solution for people who are losing more structured,
well, also, you're also
automatable jobs. Automatable.
Yeah.
Automatable jobs. Like,
know what you mean, at the very least.
Well, who was it? It was the famous neuroscientist we were always talking about. His brother, the reporter.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. There'll be a name popping up on screen now because I can't think of it. Sam Harris is the neuroscientist, and his brother is...
Ben Harris?
Ben Harris? Someone Harris? His surname's Harris.
Anyway, Mr. Harris. Mr. Harris was talking about truck drivers in the US and how 6 million jobs are just in truck driving.
Yep.
And we already have vehicles now from companies like Tesla who can produce trucks which are automated and drive themselves. So these people and miners are moving closer and closer to being out of jobs within the next decade.
That is true.
So
I think the biggest problem there is
it's already upon us.
The biggest problem there is you're getting rid of jobs. Doing stuff like that is also creating jobs. The problem is, in the short term, it's not creating jobs for the person who used to be a truckie. Because he doesn't have the transferable skills to go into some of the jobs that are being created by an automated truck service or an automated train service.
Which I definitely understand.
Which gets people pissed off. It's like when you look at Margaret Thatcher back when she closed all the mines.
Yeah.
That probably saved Britain's economy, but a lot of people fucking hated Margaret Thatcher because of that.
Yeah.
Because so many people lost their jobs.
Yeah, you definitely need... I know what we've done here in Victoria is with the closure of our automotive plants, because we don't have any anymore.
Nope.
They've done upskilling or reskilling for those who are working in those jobs to go and find new jobs. Yep. So that's what you need. You need to couple that.
You need to do something like that, yeah.
But then, in the end, not everyone's going to... Like, if you're a truck driver, it doesn't necessarily mean you want to work in something that's taking your job.
Exactly.
So...
it's not a direct... doing stuff like that usually creates more jobs, but it's not necessarily going to create a job that's got a transferable skill set from what you're getting rid of.
Yeah, or a desire. And if you don't have the desire...
Well, exactly. Desire is the other thing as well.
If you're in your later half of your career and you don't have the desire to do a job that's replaced your previous job, how are you going to learn?
Pretty much.
What's going to drive you to learn the new skills? Well, I guess getting
paid, yeah.
Which is then why a lot of people then bring up the topic of universal
basic
welfare.
Income. Universal basic income is the one where...
Basic income, welfare.
That's the argument that everyone should have enough... Essentially, but universal basic income, rather, is the idea that everybody gets paid enough money to live, essentially. And any jobs that they do is extra money that they can then spend on whatever they want.
Yeah. But
there's been some... in small scale things where it kind of works, but from the most part, it doesn't seem likely to me.
Most of the arguments against that I've heard are quite rational.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's the classic... going back to Margaret Thatcher again, I don't know why so much tonight, but there was that really good quote that she had, which is the problem with socialism is sooner or later you run out of spending other people's money.
Yeah.
And that is essentially when you're talking about automation as well. Once you get to a certain point in automation... that's when you can actually start doing things like socialism. Because socialism works in a situation where if you've got a big machine that it can essentially just go and you say, I need a car, push a button and a car pops out. If you got to the point where you can do that to the point where it barely needs maintenance, hardly anyone's working, that's the kind of place where socialism will work.
Yeah, and that's
like the ultimate utopia of everything working. It's probably never going to get to that point. And
that's the main argument behind these creativity.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the same kind of argument. Is that
you have more time in your hands, and you can do things like more. Well, you can do more creative things.
And people will have money, so that they will be able to spend it on artists and creators of things.
Yeah.
So
they can dabble.
Exactly. The more automated you have production, the more you can focus on creativity. Essentially, which makes sense. But I mean, it's hard to say. It's trying to predict something like that seems almost impossible.
No, I don't. Yeah, I'd never try and sit down and predict it. I definitely think it's good to discuss it.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to predict it, I think that's just a waste of time and effort.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're good discussing it because then, if enough people discuss it, then we could then help highlight or identify potential pitfalls.
Yeah.
Along the journey.
Indeed.
But where it ends up, who knows? Like, the Dolphins could take over in like 20 years for all we know. Good
old Dolphins.
Just like in the Simpsons
episode.
Yeah,
that's what I was thinking. It's Simpsons episode, right?
Yeah.
Super intelligent dolphins take over the planet.
Yeah, exactly.
Like a Treehouse of Horror episode.
Well, they've been pretty accurate with a lot of the things they predicted.
That's true, but when you've been on TV for 25 years, probably sooner or later you're bound to get... They got President Trump, right? They had a President Trump thing years before he was even thought about it.
Yeah. Well, they have.
That probably made Trump decide, I'm going to be president. Actually, you know what made Trump decide he wanted to be president? Is there was he had this thing where, was it Jimmy Fallon?
Said he could, I know it was Fallon, but someone called him out saying he could never be president.
Well, it was President Obama called him out saying that. I think that was probably the biggest one.
Oh yeah,
because it was like
it was the mean
accepting the mean tweets or something. I can't remember what late night show did it, but it was like mean tweets or something.
Jimmy Kimmel.
It might have been Jimmy.
He does
Jimmy Kimmel.
He does the mean tweets.
So it had President Obama was on his show and he was doing the mean tweets thing. So he was running out tweets, and one of them was from Donald Trump, who said. He said something like Obama's going to go down in history as the worst president in the United States, or something to that effect. And then he said, well, at least I'll go down as a president of the United States. And I guarantee that Trump saw that and said, fuck you, I'm going to be president.
That may be true. I think that's definitely a tipping point that pushed him into actually running.
I think a big reason, because he was it's not like he did it for the money. He's making a hell of a lot less money now than he was when he was running his bloody Trump empire.
I think he might be making more.
I doubt it.
No, but like dodgy way behind the scenes, because his salary, he can't take anything less than $1 by law. So he's taking his salary is $1 a year.
Yep.
But supposedly the deals he's setting up for the companies which he owns through his like.
See, I've heard that as well.
Networks.
But every time I've heard that, I've looked into it and I've seen no evidence for it at all.
Yeah, which is true. But I guess if you look at it this way, if he
I can imagine he's doing it. Don't get me wrong.
No, yeah, but say what you're saying is true. The potential other side is he's setting up the country to be strong and powerful again.
That is true.
Which definitely benefits all his companies, because
that is also true.
So
he has done a few things that wouldn't be beneficial for his to his companies, though.
Well, you can't.
Like when he was tough on China a lot of the time, and it created some tension because he has a lot of shit in China. And China, and also Russia as well when he cracked down on Russia.
Yeah, but he's trying to flog hotels to North Korea now.
True, but why wouldn't you?
Did you see that?
Yeah.
That's right. But going back to your point about Obama making him crack and forcing him to go into the race.
I think a big reason he went into the race was ego.
I've seen a video of him being interviewed from the 1980s where he said he's thought about being president.
Yeah.
So it's been in his mind for a long time.
I'm sure it's always probably been a thing where, because he's an ambitious dude. I mean, he's been successful in like 5 different fields, for Christ's sake. He's been a reality TV show. He's been a bloody mogul of industry. He's now president of the United States.
Well, it's true. He's worked very hard. He started off with nothing, a small loan of $1 million from his father.
I love that line. I mean, it's the best part about that line is it's kind of true, right? Because he took $1 million and turned it into multi-billion, like 40 billion or something he's worth now. So that's still impressive, but it's hilarious. The idea of a small loan of $1 million is possibly my favourite line from the entire election cycle.
You can just imagine him saying with like a shit-eating grin.
Well, exactly.
Or just like that grin where he's like, it just makes you laugh.
Mm-hmm. But it was quite... Speaking about North Korea, actually, it's a damn good job with North Korea. I honestly thought, for the longest time, and... Honestly, I'm not sure how well this meetings are actually going to work out. But for the longest time, I assumed the only way that we were going to fix North Korea problem was if South Korea went in, assassinated Kim Jong-un and his generals. Honestly, I thought that was the only way you were going to end that kind of tirade. To be able to get him to, 1, even sit at the table is impressive as hell. And 2, to actually... Like, they're talking about denuclearization.
Yeah, I
They've
definitely
already
agree where we are
agreed.
now it's a lot better than where we were before.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people who dislike Trump say that he was the main reason, though, that caused this whole escalation in rhetoric from North Korea and then
But that's
testing
clearly
their
not
missiles.
true, though, right? Because
I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it enough.
Literally, from what I've looked into it, essentially for the entire Obama administration,
Well, he's only
Kim Jong Un was just building up his arsenal because he could, because Obama wouldn't do a damn thing about it. Obama was being too pussyfooted.
Well, Trump's only
What
been
Trump did
in power for 500 days. About,
Yeah, exactly.
Roughly. So.
But essentially, what Trump did is he said, "Look, we have more nukes than you.
Yeah.
We will fucking destroy you if you start doing shit that is crazy and bad for the world." That's essentially what he said. And he was doing it in a very Trumpian fashion, like calling Kim Jong-un fat and shit like that. Short and fat, I think it was. But, and they were like, those bloody Twitter feud that they had is ridiculous. The fact that two leaders of a nation were having a fucking Twitter feud is just ridiculous.
You know what's ridiculous? Have you seen the trailer of the proposal they sent across to him?
No? Yes, I did. That was fucking amazing.
It looks like some Michael Bay movie.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
I thought it was a hoax because I've only heard it. I haven't seen it.
Maybe it is, and maybe I've been pulled in by the hoax, but I'm pretty sure it's real.
From what I've been told, it's true.
Yeah, same.
And all I could hear, I'm like, is this like a movie by...
It's an Avengers movie. Michael Bay.
Well, it sounds like a Michael Bay Avengers movie. We'll have to put a link into it because it's insane.
It is pretty ridiculous. But the fact that, like, he's got him to come to the table and agree, he's agreed to close down a nuclear testing facility. And essentially, America's gone, we know this exists, you close this down, we'll stop doing our border testing on South Korea. Our war games, essentially, is what they were called, where they're essentially going into the border of North and South Korea, and South Korea and America would do training drills, essentially as a show of force, and saying, we're fucking here, don't do anything.
Well, it wasn't just South Korea and the US.
There was a lot of people, other people. But the main factors were South Korea, and then the United States, I think, was second biggest, because they spent a shitload of money over there.
Yeah, for sure.
But the idea being, like, being able to come to a compromise like that. And there's been a lot of people giving him flack because he's saying, oh, look at all the atrocities that North Korea's been doing, and you're being nice to him now. It's like, sure, but something's got to give. If you can, you're never going to win an argument about bloody civil rights and human right violations in North Korea, because he's a fucking dictator.
Yeah,
that's how they keep.
It's the same thought I had. I'm like, okay, on one hand, they're slowly like de-escalating the situation.
Exactly. If you can stop them having fucking nukes, sure, human rights violations in North Korea are fucking horrible, right? It's a compromise, but I think it's a necessary compromise.
Well, that's what I've my mind's grappled with for the last week or two. It's like, is there another way? Like, was there another? Well, would there be
aside
another
from war?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Is there another way?
And the problem with war is the fact that China is. They've backed down a bit, but they're still backing North Korea. If you go to war with North Korea, you're essentially going to war with China. And China honestly may back down because it's not beneficial for them to go to war. But at the same time,
because I think it's very easy to sit and criticize and say, well, you can't make a deal with someone who's committed so many atrocities, which I do agree with on some hand. But then on the other, I'm like, well, you've got to resolve the situation, so you got to be more pragmatic. So at what point, where's the line? Like, well, exactly. Okay, maybe like resolve the issue now, and then we'll get him like in a couple of years later. Like,
also, I mean, what's the line out of Sun Tzu? It's talking about build a golden bridge for your opponent to retreat upon. If you are
Chapter
having
7, page 3,
something like that, I don't know, I can't remember specifically, but the idea being that if you try and get him to the table and all you do is say about how much of an evil fucking person he is, why would he? What benefit? What, you're never going to get him to make a deal. Exactly. And if you can get to denuclearization of North Korea, that's incredible.
You can't spit in someone's face and then ask them to sign a document.
Exactly.
So,
and the only way you can do that is if you've beaten them in a war, essentially. Or you've threatened them to the point where you're saying, we will go to war unless you sign this document, essentially.
So the potential options are going forward from here would be in a couple years, someone then goes to The Hague saying we want to try Kim Jong-un.
Something like that.
For atrocities.
And I mean, well, exactly. Like, you've got to get to the point where you can...
It could even be like 50 years, 60 years down the track.
Exactly. I mean, you get to the point...
He's
even
probably going to be
then,
dead by then.
You get inside the... Well, yeah, he's pretty fucking fat. But
It's a high sodium diet.
if you can get into your foot in the door and actually have a relationship with North Korea, which is fucking unprecedented to start with, but if you have a relationship with North Korea and you've got them to end their, or at least scale back their nuclear testing, I mean, the end goal, if they end nuclear testing, it'll possibly be the best presidential act in the past 30 years. Like, it was ridiculous.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I mean, to get North Korea to end its nuclear program would be ridiculous. But the problem is you have to preface that with the fact that you have to... Like, it has to be verifiably ended their nuclear. They have to let people in to prove that they've ended it.
They can't just say, yeah, we're not doing it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Like bloody Iran did. Did you hear about that? With the Iran deal that Trump entered?
I've
essentially
so
what
many
it was,
differing opinions.
Essentially, well, I'm actually fully with Trump on
It's
this
almost
one,
like a lucky dip.
Well, essentially, under the Obama administration, Obama was giving Iran a bunch of money so that they wouldn't do nuclear testing. And Iran was still doing nuclear testing. They were just taking the money and doing it anyway, essentially. And then Trump said, well, one, it's dumb to... Like, why would you pay another country not to do something? That just seems stupid. But two, they were doing it anyway. So he ended the funding, and then there was this hilarious footage, well, also somewhat terrifying footage, of bloody Iranian parliament. They're sitting there and they are burning American flags, yelling "Death to America" in their parliament.
That's where that was from. Yeah, I remember seeing.
Yeah, that was from the Iranian parliament.
Which that makes sense. Okay.
And that was after he essentially, and all he essentially did was say, "We're not going to give you billions of dollars anymore because one, it was a dumb deal in the first place, and two, you weren't even holding up your end of the deal."
Yeah, so that's fine.
Pretty much, but it was just, it just seems crazy to me that, like, I didn't even know that was a thing until he ended it, which isn't entirely surprising. But the idea being that, why would you pay a foreign power not to do something like that? It just seems so crazy to me. It's such a weak stance from a government.
Yeah, but then I guess if we're in the shoes of the President of the United States or even like the Prime Minister of Australia, and you got to maintain face at home and still win your like re-election,
I guess
keep
that's
your party
true.
polls. It's like a balancing act, but I personally wouldn't have done it.
It just seems strange
But
to
then
me.
no one's probably ever going to vote me in to be the leader of the world.
Oh, you never know. Trump did it.
To be continued. But yeah, so at least now...
Lord Emperor Lloyd.
Lord High Emperor.
Uh-huh.
Lord of the world. Anyway. But at least now he can grapple with North Korea from a position of more strength.
Well, you
more
actually...
power.
Exactly. You actually have a handhold there where you can even negotiate.
At least, yeah, exactly.
Because if you go in from the start and just demand everything, it's not going to work. I mean, The Art of the Deal by Trump. But there was a lot of people saying, like, clearly Trump doesn't believe the good things he's saying about Kim Jong-un. I don't even think Kim Jong-un doesn't even believe that. But he's being diplomatic.
Well, that's where the term comes from.
Exactly.
Being diplomatic. You can't just...
You need to actually use diplomacy, otherwise it's not going to happen.
Lose your shit and become an SJW and start going like, no, we won't do this, we don't do that, we don't accept it.
Yeah, and quite frankly, it doesn't work.
Well, that's the thing. It's the real world is a lot more dirty.
Well, indeed.
You have to make these deals. Doesn't mean you should ever give up on ever persecuting him. But Trump might not personally sign a document saying we're going to go after Kim Jong-un. Doesn't mean he can't go behind the scenes and ask someone who works at The Hague, like Amal Clooney or whatever, just to name a name that I know of, to go then and
even then,
chase him down.
Like, because bloody North Korea is not part of the.
Well, that's the thing.
Like they're not even really under the power of the Hague.
And
like the Hague, I'm sure the Hague has come out and said that the Hague being the World Court, essentially international court.
Yep.
But it's talking about, like, I'm sure they have charges on
delicious
fucking
chocolate.
Kim Jong Un, right? There must be a thing. I'm sure someone filed charges on Kim Jong Un. It's just that he doesn't give a shit because he's a dictator of his own country. Like,
we'll look into that later, but I definitely hope so. But yeah, it's how he isn't going to agree to it. None of the generals are going to agree to it. So, at what point, like, at least from a position of strength, once this could take years. Like,
it'll take.
Say there's nuclear denuclearization, then the poverty starts to dissipate. We start getting like the economy running. They start like getting.
Well, if they start trading with South Korea again, I mean, their economy will go up, and then all their people will be under better conditions anyway.
Yeah, and from that point, then you could get someone to then overthrow the government in a coup supported by the CIA. But
it sounds like a Dan Brown book.
Well, that's the thing. Like, you don't know.
But I know what you mean. Like,
it's going to take time. You can't.
Indeed.
The only real option would be to go in there and like capture him, like a capture-kill mission, which then
exactly.
those who are asking for it would be arguing against that anyway. So
exactly, because they were saying, "Oh, don't do military things in other countries where you don't need to," which I actually tend to agree with, and I think for the most part, Trump seems to be doing as well. He seems to be against foreign intervention.
I agree. I think,
and that makes sense under his platform because his platform is "Make America Great Again." He's focusing on America.
I think if you get attacked as a country, then that's a different scenario.
Indeed, and that's what he was talking about with North Korea as well. The reason he was firing back against North Korea and Kim Jong Un quite specifically through Twitter and shit was because North Korea was firing fucking missiles. They were doing missile testing.
Yeah, so
and they were enriching uranium.
Yeah, like, and they were shooting. Well, they weren't shooting directly towards Guam or Hawaii, but
pretty much shooting at Japan mainly.
They shot over Japan, so it was within close
enough
enough range.
We were shooting over Japan. You were shooting at Japan. You were threatening Japan essentially.
Yeah, exactly. So in that situation, you can understand why you'd then go out and engage with another sovereign nation.
And it's the problem with, like, it's the classic thing of Team America World Police, right? America is seen as these people who have to police the world. And that's partly their own fault because they have been policing the whole world. They've been doing a good job of going in and overthrowing dictators and stuff like I mean, they've done some problems as well, like selling a bunch of weapons to Iraq and all that kind of stuff before they went there in the first place.
Yep.
But they've kind of put themselves in a position where they're like the front line against terrorism. Like the war on terror.
Yeah.
How is that? It's not really an American problem unless it's terrorism on America.
Well, it's an international thing.
Exactly.
Well, did you see what happened in Sweden? And was it Finland? Was it the other place? One may not. I think it was Finland. They're not sure whether it was just an accident or if it was intentional
a truck attack or something.
Yeah. Well, there was a truck that ran into. I think it was 5 people.
Yep.
So
truck of peace attack.
Yeah, well, the guy handed himself in, so it could have been an accident.
Could have been. If he handed himself in, it was probably an accident.
However, the other one where there was 5... Well, I know there was 5 people gunned down in Sweden. I'm not sure if it was 5 actually now for the truck, but this... I only found this out, like, like midday.
Yeah, I heard about Sweden. I hadn't heard about the other one. But I mean, that's the ridiculous thing, right? You look at bloody the UK. Islamic terrorist attacks are commonplace. Like, if you want to die in a terrorist attack and don't want to go to the Middle East, just go to France or something. Chances are, like...
Thanks, I'm going to France for Christmas.
Yeah, well.
Well, apparently, my girlfriend's dad, when he was near the Moulin Rouge, some guy pulled a knife on him.
Yeah.
So, like, that level of...
But there is actually a huge amount of violence increasing in England specifically. Which is
there was
a huge amount of violence, which isn't like even Islamic based. It's like there's a lot of Islamic terrorism going on.
There's a travel warning put out for all travellers going to UK, based on the increase in moped crime.
Yeah, people like robbing people via moped and stabbing them and driving off.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
London overtook New York for how much crime it has.
Yeah,
that's violent crime. That's insane.
Yeah.
Because I think New York has a bigger population than London, right? They may be comparable. Google that.
I don't know.
Google that shit.
I don't know. It depends, because New York.
I would think it would, but at the same time, just because America's a big
just
country,
New York,
but
all the boroughs, because
yeah,
don't
that's
they
true as well.
expand out?
I suppose it's probably New York City more accurately. New York City versus London, but that's insane to me. Having that much more crime than bloody New York, because New York is the classic
8.538 million.
That's for New York
based
City?
off 2016.
Yep.
Census, or whatever they call them in America, polling.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't think it'd be polling.
Yeah, I don't know what they call it. In Australia, it's a census. So they're comparable. 8.163 million in London.
So it's slightly less.
Slightly less, but on the same order of magnitude.
Yep.
So you're talking like... So an equal population, and you've... Well, okay. I can see it then. But, like, the amount of gangs and stuff that... Like, the amount of gangs they have in New York... It's just insane to me. Melbourne will be like 1 million or something, right? I don't know, like 3 million, 4 million?
I think it's 4.5 now.
Yep. But it just seemed insane to me that you would overtake the violent crime numbers than New York. It just seems...
It says 4.8.
4.8, okay. That's for Melbourne population, for those wondering. But the problem, there's a lot of ways they're trying to solve that I just think are dumb. Like, I think last week
UK.
I told you about, like, yeah, like last week I told you about the knife laws they're not planning on bringing in. Yeah, it was 2 weeks ago.
I'm not sure.
But essentially they're they're saying if you've got sharp knives, you can take them in and they'll shave them down.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But they are apparently also having a problem with so-called zombie knives.
What's a zombie knife?
Essentially, they're akin to machetes. They're kind of like, they're sold as like novelty. They're like real knives, but they're sold as like novelty pieces, and they've got like zombie pictures and stuff on them. The idea being, it's like, oh, it's like the classic zombie apocalypse knife kind of bullshit, right?
Yeah.
They're sold by like people who are selling knives that are like, it's for people who have like a knife collection. It's like, oh, this is my zombie apocalypse knife, ha ha ha. It's like a joke essentially.
Yep.
But a lot of people in the UK are buying them because they're cheap as piss and you buy them online.
As like defensive weapons, or
yeah, people are carrying. Well, they say they're carrying them as defensive weapons, but a lot of them are just going
yeah.
out there and attacking people, like thugs going out there attacking people. Like there was a guy who was like, there was like a cyclist who pulled one on and started smashing his car up with his knife with a blade like this long.
That's it. Yeah, I've seen that.
But like
YouTube clip.
Yeah, but it's insane to me that they have that kind of violence in London. I mean, it's not that insane. Like it's not like it's always been the safest city ever. It's never been great, but it's this huge spike, and I wonder what's causing it.
I don't know. You could say, if you take a stab, I could say potentially
take a stab.
Take a stab. Poor choice of words. Potentially just the unrest in that region. Because if you look,
that's my thinking as well.
If you look towards the more Nordic countries and Germany. Germany, Finland, Denmark, Sweden. I'm not sure about Greenland or Iceland as much, and Norway, including the others. There tends to be more, like the culture is more. What do you call it? Not Anglo-Saxon, Nordic, white. So I think there's a lot less.
It is going less that way now, though, because they're having a huge amount of Islamic immigration.
Yeah,
and
so
they're creating
I think
ghettos.
that's what I'm trying to get to, being diplomatic. I think they're having a large influx of migrants.
It's a culture shock.
And I don't think they're as... Well, I don't think it's being as accepted as well as people would think. And I think there's a large...
But there's also
sections.
There is also a problem with the idea of... And whenever you say this, you have to preface it like, I'm not saying all Muslims, because of course you do for some reason. But there is a cultural difference between Islam and Western values that are incompatible. The idea of gay people, for instance, or atheists. If you're in an Islamic country, you are killed. Simple as that. I mean, was it in Iran, I think? Very recently, there was a Christian woman who drank from an Islamic fountain, and she was now sentenced to death. I don't know, that may have been muted and she's now life imprisonment. Maybe. Great for her, I suppose. I'd have to look it up. But that is something that is not compatible with Western countries. If you come to a Western country, you have to... Gay people are allowed to get married. Gay people are allowed to live and live openly. And that's just an incompatibility between... Because it's incompatibility with the religion of Islam, really, but the culture of those Islamic countries is most of them are theocracies. So they're run as the... As the religion, anyway.
Someone pointed out something that I found that piqued my interest, was that Western society, like religion, like Christianity, like all its different branches, have gone through a reformation.
They've gone through multiple reformations.
Whereas Islam, I don't believe, has.
No, it's exactly the same as it was when it was founded in like 700 AD.
That's, I think, the biggest issue.
Pretty much. Because there was Judaism, and Judaism itself went through a reformation where they stopped doing a lot of the shit that was kind of seen as bad in Judaism. And then Christianity came along, which was a reformation of that, even. And then Christianity is split off into... And Catholicism was pretty hardcore. And then... Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I'll get to that in a second. But then you also have... What was I saying?
Sorry.
Oh yeah, the splitting of Christianity from Catholicism, then splitting off into the Church of England and Protestantism as well. That's even further. Because Protestants are even more dull, I suppose. It's not... That sounds more negative than I mean it. It's less extreme than Catholicism in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And it's gone through... Essentially, Christianity has gone through a bunch of reformations before it's reached the point it is now. And to the point now... The average Christian doesn't hate gays. They're perfectly fine with gays. They don't give a shit. You get a few, like, in, like, rural Tennessee.
Well, so, like, to me...
I hate the faggots. But, aside from that...
Well, to me, if you look at... If I was just to be, like, very, like, say... A bird's eye view, like, 3,000 foot quick overlay... Christianity or Western religions tend to be... less passionate than Islam.
That's
Islam's
also
like
true.
Extremely passionate. So they have strong belief in all their...
That is another thing. Is the average person who calls
or
themselves a Christian probably doesn't even go to church. There's a huge percentage of people who say they're Christians who don't even go to church. They may go to church like once a year, on like Easter or something, or maybe at Christmas. And a lot that never even do that. And they just call themselves Christians because they live in a country that was predominantly founded by Christians.
Well, so I think the countries now, Western countries, are mainly what they've taken is the morals.
The morals and spirituality. And even then, they've taken the good morals and they've gotten rid of the ones that were shitty.
I think it's mainly they've just taken the morals and then they've put that into society. So as a whole, we tend to share the same moral values and thoughts. And then... the extra religious or spirituality.
That sounds
I've got dry lips from the tea. Is then something you can go and seek as an individual more, because it's separation of church and state.
Indeed, we don't have theocracies.
No,
and I think that has something that's hugely to do with it as well. Is the fact that. I remember it was on Q&A, which is a TV show on the ABC here in Australia, which is essentially like, it has a panel of people, usually all left-wing, who are sitting on discussing things. And they talk about politics mainly. But...
They have a dialogue, Thomas. A dialogue.
Yeah. A lot of the time it's more monologue-y. I'll take that as a comment.
Yes, that's true.
Good old Barry. But there was a woman on there, and I think it was Majid Nawaz was on there, who is a Islamic reformist, essentially. But he was on there, and he was talking to this woman, and this other woman on the panel, and he could not get her to say that a theocracy was a bad idea. And he was just dumbfounded by this. He was sitting there saying, well, yeah, but we agree that a theocracy isn't a good idea, right? And she refused to say it.
Maybe she didn't understand what a theocracy meant.
No, he did. He explained it to her, and she would talk around the question. And I think the reason is because... she probably doesn't think a theocracy is a bad idea. The idea, because she was a Muslim and she believed in the Quran. If the Quran is the indisputable word of God, why would you not want to run a country in the same way that you run the Quran? And Majid Nawaz was essentially he's the founder of, well, I don't know if he was the founder of, but he's one of the top members of, I'm pretty sure he was one of the founders of Quilliam, which is a UK organisation that is a group of Muslim people who are fighting against Islamic extremism, essentially.
When you said Quilliam, I thought of the brain enhancement nootropic drugs. I think they have a similar name.
They might.
Qualia, sorry.
Qualia, yeah. Yeah, Quilliam is a organisation run by Muslims who are against extremism, essentially.
Yep.
But they've had a lot of problems because they've been branded as extremists themselves somehow. I don't understand how. Because essentially they speak out against Islam, and the problem we have in society at the moment is if someone speaks out against Islam, somehow they're racist.
I think it's if you speak out against anything.
That's kind of true.
Not
except for white people.
Not necessarily
white Christians. White Christians, you can say whatever you want about, pretty much.
Yeah, but if you speak out, then I think it's seen as you're being aggressive and you're not being compassionate towards someone.
Well, exactly. It's the idea that criticism isn't necessarily bigotry. That's the problem. But if for some reason, in this day and age, it's perceived as bigotry for some reason, even if you say something that's true.
To me, constructive criticism is a necessity of a civilized, well-balanced society.
Of course. You need to discuss, and that's the other thing as well with a lot of the things we've had with people talking about banning a lot of speech codes and things like that, where you're trying to ban people from speaking and saying things. And these people, it's coming from a good place. They're saying, oh, I don't want people to be offended. But there's nothing wrong with being offended. Nothing happens to you if you're offended.
Yeah, because if you break it down to its, like, I wouldn't say cellular level, if you break it right down and then you think of it like this, okay, imagine living your life from the beginning to end, and everything you do and say is based off not trying to offend the other person.
Can't do it.
You understand how unrealistic and how ridiculous it sounds, but then why, when it comes to things like sensitive topics, do we then suddenly just go, oh, I won't comment because it's too sensitive topic? Like,
exactly.
No one's willing to stand up.
Particularly, it's one of my favourite lines ever, but the idea of hate facts. When you could say something that is technically true, but people will refuse to listen to you because it sounds like it's racist or it sounds like it's sexist or whatever.
Yeah. But
a good example is the thing that you just brought up on your phone there, which is true, which is there is a big problem with inbreeding in the Islamic community. The reason being is because I don't think it's actually in the Quran, I think it's in the Hadith, or one of the books of the Hadith, maybe the Sirah, but it talks about how Muhammad married his first cousin. One of his wives was his first cousin. So therefore it's seen as okay to marry your first cousin.
Yeah.
Genetically, it isn't.
Well, I guess if it's in your religion, you're only allowed to marry someone of a similar kind, even at just that level.
That's true as well.
Eventually,
I mean, it's going to happen inevitably anyway. Yeah. Because if you're in a small, say you're in England, and there's it's not tiny, but there is a smallish Islamic community. Yeah. And if you want to marry into Islam, it's more difficult. It's
going to make it a lot harder.
Yeah. But like the problem is, if you marry your first cousin, well, if more specifically, if you have a child with your first cousin, if you have a child with someone that closely related to you, on average, the IQ of the child will be 10 points lower than either of the parents.
Yeah.
Or 10 points lower than the average of the parents. Or
but
similar.
Isn't the issue not necessarily the IQ of that child will necessarily be lower by 10 points? It's more of the other effects, aren't? Well,
the other effects are worse.
Aren't they?
But that's just a run-on effect. That's just a run-on effect of going on to try and explain why you have sort of this barbaric extremist version of Islam that's kind of starting to take over, and is because you get people who are more barbarous because over time you get a stupider population. That's not really a good way of saying it, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but there are birth defects that you can get, like genetic defects.
I was thinking more of like the psychological effects, where aren't you more prone to violence and more prone to irrational thought patterns?
Yes,
well, isn't that the theory?
Well,
I don't know if it's been proven.
I'm pretty sure it has.
Well, it may have. I can't know everything in the world yet.
Always claim to, and then you can just correct yourself if you're wrong later.
I always take the other approach.
Yeah, well.
It's safer.
That is true.
legally safe.
But also, I mean, I'll just say this bluntly, and I won't bother about apologizing. It's the fact that stupider people tend to be more violent a lot of the time anyway.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at poorer populations, there tend to be more crime. That isn't necessarily... That's also indicative of the fact that people are poor. If you're poor, you're more likely to commit a crime because you want shit.
That is from a lower socio-economic background?
Yes.
That's the
politically correct term.
That's the politically correct term.
Poor fuckers.
But, yes.
Which, I mean, I'm kind of a part of that group.
But yeah, if we were to... I think, because we're sort of waffling on a bit, I think if we...
Indeed.
To take all those points, I think that's definitely... and wrap it up, I think that's one of the reasons why there's more unrest happening in Europe, because the clash of those cultures.
Yes. That was the point I'm making, is there is a clash of cultures where... There are certain parts of Islamic teachings that are
it's
not compatible with law in countries.
What's the thing? Countries. If you want to immigrate to another country, to me that's fine. But then when you're there, you're gonna have to assimilate to that country's values.
And people, when you say that,
it's like choosing a football team.
People get offended.
You wear the same jersey.
Yeah, exactly. People get offended when you say that, but they wouldn't get offended if I went to Saudi Arabia and I was walking down the street with my girlfriend with no headscarf on and macking it on the side of the road and then saying, well, what are you doing? You're just trying to force me to become part of your culture. It's like, yeah, they'll arrest me.
Yeah.
Well, they'll probably arrest her. I'll probably be fine.
No, you'd be arrested too. But it's the thing. It's always the double standards.
Well, it is. It's a double standard. No one expects you to go... If you're a woman and you go to an Islamic country, you're wearing at the very least, a headscarf.
Yep.
If you don't, you will be arrested.
Yep.
And potentially killed, depending on what you were doing, what else you were wearing. If you're wearing bloody shorts and a t-shirt...
Good luck.
Yeah. Like, there was that classic photo, I think it was Saudi Arabia, actually, where there was a guy and a girl there on holiday, and there was a picture on their Instagram of the girl, and she was wearing...
Yes, yeah. I think I remember.
Yeah, she was like a hot girl, shorts, tight t-shirt. But luckily they had left the country by the time it got to the authorities, but they were hunting her down.
Yeah.
Like, that's not... If you believe those things... I mean, hell, I don't even care if you believe those things and you come to our country. But you can't impose those things.
Yeah.
Like, it's just this... Like, I don't care if people come to this country and they say... I don't know, like, even like the hate preachers that we have over in this country and in the UK a lot as well. Yeah. Where there are these imams that are coming around and they are extremist imams, essentially.
Yeah, they are.
And there was the one that said you should kill homosexuals. This was a guy who was supposed to to have a spot with all our politicians and things because he was this respected imam, and he was saying... Yeah,
they go from 0 to 11
he said you could kill gays.
Yeah,
he said you could kill gays, and he said, well, of course, you're doing them a favour. It stops them from sinning in the future.
It's just ignorant.
But the idea of that was... He was saying that, and then he was... later, he was talking about, I don't understand why people were finding that offensive. And the reason that he wasn't... why he was surprised by that is because that is the dominant belief in Islamic countries.
Well,
homosexuality is a sin and should be at the very least illegal.
Yeah, when you've been tempered by your culture's values for so long.
Well, exactly.
It changes who you are.
And there's also always comes up the argument with people who are moral relativists, where they say, well, how can you say that your culture is better than theirs? And I can say quite equivocally, my culture is better than theirs.
Well, in our current understanding of like what's good and bad,
yeah,
and what the majority of the world sees as good and bad,
yeah,
then,
and even if you don't take it on that, if you do it from purely quantitative state, take pretty much any metric, we do better.
Yeah,
people are richer, people live longer, people blah 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 blah. You can keep going on pretty much any metric, and Western cultures do better. Actually, life expectancy isn't necessarily true because most, as we were talking about in a previous podcast, people from Japan often tend to be the longest living people. But that could be genetic more than it's cultural, I would think.
No, that's the you're talking about the blue zones. I don't know if we discussed the blue zones.
No, we didn't. We were just discussing life expectancy and the fact that the world's oldest people are often Japanese.
Yeah, so that's Osaka, Japan is definitely one blue zone. Just to go back to the blue zones.
Yep.
Basically, if you look at the website, thebluezone.com, they just break down like a quick summary of like what the diet is. 95% is plant-based, so it's majority is like vegetarian or vegan.
And then
5% is animal-based.
Yep.
So of your daily macros, 65% are coming from carbohydrates, 20% is fats,
The last 15
and 15%
protein.
is proteins, which is pretty accurate. Like if you look at most like clear scientific scientific studies which look at the needs for protein, most of the time like 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of lean body mass is more than enough. A lot of people say
That's true, but steak tastes good.
yeah, I'm not saying it doesn't taste good. A lot of people believe it's per kilo of body weight,
Right.
but it's lean body mass because you don't
That's not the same. You
necessarily-
don't count your fat in how much protein intake you should have.
Well, exactly. You don't necessarily count your fat or your bones or your organs, so to speak.
Yep.
It's more your
Some of your organs probably matter, like your liver and kidneys,
Yeah,
maybe.
but if you get, even if you just get 1 gram per kilo of body weight, and you weigh 100 kilos, that's only 100 grams of protein.
Yep.
Whereas most people believe you're going to get 2 or 3 times that amount to survive. It's very rare to come across someone who suffers protein deficiency.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost unheard of in, like, Western culture.
Yeah. And a few places in Africa, you see it fairly often. But
Yeah, but people are like,
That's
oh,
about
you
it.
got to get protein. And you're like, well, in reality, you don't come across people who are suffering protein deficiency. It's more like...
Well, you do get some people, like vegans sometimes suffer from protein deficiency.
Have you ever met a vegan that suffers protein deficiency?
I never met one, but I've definitely heard of them.
What? Well, I've heard of vegans.
No, but I've heard there was
I know
a
what you
there was a doctor's report that apparently there was it was a low percentage, but there was groups of them that were just they weren't properly dieting.
Yeah, well, that's the different. Like, if you're choosing to be vegan, you have to be more switched on for what food you eat.
You also have to tell everyone.
Well, generally, if you're looking at the traditional term of vegan, then yeah, it's more of a. It's not just about what you eat. It's like why you're eating that way.
True.
And you're trying to convert the sinners who eat meat.
Yeah, kind of. It is somewhat religiosity. It's religious in its convictions. Well, not necessarily religious, but dogmatic.
But even if you just follow the Blue Zones diet, those macros, 15% of your daily intake from proteins. That's like
Not much.
for a bodybuilder, that'd be pretty like. Most of them be like 30 grams. 30 grams. Sorry, 30% of their daily calories would be coming from protein,
at least.
which is a lot.
Well, I know. Well, there was like a huge thing like in the 90s and early 2000s, right, where people just knocked out all the carbs out of their diet.
It still happens now. You have like have you ever heard the keto diet?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's happening again where there's a large portion of people who are turning towards high-fat diets.
Apparently, the keto one's not too bad if you do it intermittently. If you do it 100% of the time, it can have some problems.
So
it depends on the person, but apparently, if you do it like for like half the year or something, and then go back to a different diet for the rest, it's actually fairly beneficial from what I've heard.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors that play into it. I know a few people who diet keto. They tend to be more ketogenic in the mornings, and then they save their carbohydrates for dinner, and then they have like a really carb-dense dinner. So then they refill their insulin levels, and then they'll get that like sleepiness that comes from like
so then you can sleep
a lot
at
of
night.
carbs, and then you'll sleep.
Yeah,
But then you fast for say 12 to 16 hours. So if you ate at 6:30, 7 o'clock, then you're eating again like in the morning, like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and you've already fasted for like a decent period.
Yep.
And then at that point, you just tend to have like for breakfast and lunch, it's just more like go really hard on the vegetables and
Yep.
the more the fats, and then dinner just like stick more to the so breakfast would be more, or breakfast and lunch would be like vegetables, fats and proteins, and then it's more proteins, fats for dinner, so to speak.
It's interesting.
Proteins and carbs, sorry.
Yep.
But yeah, it's very interesting. There's so many different ways to look at it. Everything I've read and everything I've experimented with, my best advice would be just doing as natural as possible. The less processed the food, the better.
Makes sense.
Like if you start reading the ingredients list and it's like 3 feet long and it's got 20 ingredients, it tends to not be as good for your body. Like you can still, I've done this before. I've eaten a purely like almost junk food diet, like Cadbury bar, like candy bars, chocolate bars, pizza, pasta, burgers, and still hit my daily macros and calories, and was still losing a kilo a week.
Yeah. I mean, it still comes down to the fact that if you consume less calories than you're burning, you will lose weight.
Yeah, calories in versus calories out. It's a very simple...
It's a simple analogy. It's a simple analysis.
But the biggest hurdles is more like the real-world applications where people have plateaus, or they get like... They crash because they're doing it too many calories they're cutting back on, or they're cutting back on calories and they decide to start working out as well, which... Okay, if you're going to choose to do a diet, then do a diet. But if you're choosing to diet and exercise at the same time, don't drastically cut your calories. Start working out, maintain your calories. Then after a couple of weeks, if you haven't lost any weight, or you're not losing weight at
then cut down your diet.
Good rate, then you can.
The only time you should do both at once is if you're actively gaining weight. And even then, you probably don't need to a lot of the time.
Well, it depends. Some people choose to actively gain weight because they want to put on size. But, yeah, so it can be done. You can eat unhealthy and lose weight and have a six-pack and look like a fitness
Probably
model.
won't be very healthy, though.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I've done that before and I've lost a lot of weight, but you just feel like crap. And then it tends to make you... Like, I believe... Like, for me, it tended to make my skin didn't look as nice. I just felt worse. So it just tends to be easier. There's less need to monitor when you're having whole foods, and especially when you focus a lot of it on vegetables, you can almost eat freely and your body balances out pretty easily. And then you can learn, oh, okay, I might have put on a bit of weight, but my body composition doesn't change as much. I might be slightly heavier, so I can just cut back on the volumes I'm eating. And then I generally lose weight. It's a lot simpler to manage. Yeah. But I wouldn't always, but it's okay to try the calorie counting. Yeah. It's a good way to start.
It's often the easiest way to lose weight. If you actually make note of everything you eat. Because I think a big problem with a lot of people is they don't take note of shit they eat. Like, they'll get to the end of the day and they'll say, oh, I just had some, like, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then if you actually were watching them the whole day, they had, like, a pack of biscuits throughout the day as well, because they don't count it.
Most people, when they come and talk to me, and they're
food
like,
amnesia.
Oh, how did you lose? Because I've lost... At my heaviest, I was 130. I'm now, I think, between 85 to 90. Yeah. Well, there's a while where you were even under that, weren't you? Oh, I think the lowest... You got super skinny at one point. 82? Yeah. Or 80? I don't think I went below 80. But because I'm 6'3", I guess it just made me look skinnier. Yeah, when you first lost a lot of weight, you got to the point where you looked skinny as fuck. That's when I was doing that calorie counting, and I was eating the junk food. Yeah. But I also didn't realize, this is just my trial and error. I was doing that, and I was exercising hard, and I was restricting calories in the effort to aim for a loss of like a kilo a week. Yeah. To lose a kilo a week, which is pretty ridiculous. Which is the upper limit of like the healthy range, like 250 grams to a kilo a week. Yep. That's considered like in the safe zones. But healthy weight loss. I didn't factor in just the effect of just working, like when I was working hospitality, just being on my feet. That it's just extra like slow. Yeah, it's the same thing. Like when I'm at work, my work is fairly physical, and I don't really think about it much. No.
Like you don't consider that exercise, but it kind of is.
Well, it just adds up.
Yeah, exactly.
So that can push you, even if you're got your workout down and you got your diet down and you're losing a kilo a week, but you don't factor in your work may add on an extra 500 grams. So it's going to work, but eventually you're going to get to a point where you're losing too quickly, and then you're cutting into like your hormones, like storage. Well, so when you start cutting down calories too much, you're not restoring your supply for like hormones and energy.
Yep.
And you're just gonna like crash, and your immune system's gonna decrease. Your sex drive like disappears and whatnot. So it's better to do it slower. But I guess if you're suffering, like you have the fear of suffering a heart attack, or you're in imminent danger of suffering like a heart attack or something dangerous, then maybe losing the weight quicker will be better for you in the long run. It's not. Yeah,
potentially.
Fun. It's not fun. Suck. Yeah. Like if you look at any bodybuilder, like a 3%er, when they get down to 3%, like once they go down, I think it's below 7. From experience, like 8%, 7%, you can look good and feel great.
You're talking about body fat?
Yeah, body fat percentage. Once you're below, like, once you start going down, like,
well, it's like the classic thing. You talk about Ryan Reynolds when he did Blade Trinity.
Yeah,
he got down to 4. I think it was 3 point something % body fat.
Between 3 and 4.
Yeah, but he looked ripped as fuck.
Because you're just lying around all day.
Well, but essentially, that's what he was saying. He's like, why would anybody do this? I can't do anything. Like, I finish doing like shooting for the day, and I just literally fall asleep, and then I have to wake up in the morning and do exercise. Like, I don't have time to do anything with this cool looking body.
Well, because
and I think Jessica Biel, who was also in that movie, was similar, and she got down to like, I think she was down to like 7% body fat, which for a woman is insane.
I don't know if it'd be that low, but it's fair for women. It's more dangerous the lower you get because.
Well, I mean, women have more fat reserves in their hips and their breasts
for their hormones.
Yeah.
Telemarketer. Anyway, but yeah, the blue zone diet is something definitely to look at. It's clearly worked for a lot of those cultures.
Yeah, clearly.
But it's not just the food. It's like it's a whole lifestyle thing, which people don't really seem to understand.
Yeah,
they think it's just
because I eat this food, I live longer. No, it's because you eat that food and you also live an active life, and all your own food, your own prepared food, pretty much.
Yeah, so it's that, and there's always extra things. So if you to like look at briefly look at some of the areas, like you're active, as in you can go work out. But you're active at different like areas, like you're lifting stuff, you're moving around at a really slow pace, you're very briefly and infrequently moving at a quick pace. Then you're eating cleanly, whole foods, you've grown those foods, but then there's other areas which pop up, like socializing. You're socializing with people, you're not stressing. So it's not easy. Like the Western culture, it tends to sort of put up all these barriers which directly prevent these things from coming out.
Yeah, that's true.
These things from coming out prevent you from living these type of lifestyles. Like if you want to have like if say you become a person who's like a longevist and you want to live, I don't think that's a term, can be one now, but you want to live for as long as possible, then you're gonna start to in your own sort of research, you'll uncover all these different areas. But when you start to implement them, you just start to feel the pushback.
Yeah,
might not be direct, but you begin to feel like the pushback from social friends, society in general, like how it's just harder to find foods which are cleaner to eat. It's harder to find a lot of plant-based meals which aren't covered in like dairy. People seem to like look at you weird when you exercise. Probably more so in other countries. I think Australia, we're pretty lucky that we're pretty outdoorsy, so it's not seen as
we've got a
bad.
Big country, I think, probably has something to do with it.
But those things, and then with Facebook, what's the term? Social media, sorry.
Yep.
With social media, that's sort of taking you away from socializing like face to face with other people, which is another.
That's why I barely ever use any social media.
Well, it's another thing that has been like socializing face to face with people has been a proven marker for longevity. I'll show you a good website. Have you ever heard of Ben Greenfield?
I think yes.
So
That sounds familiar.
I read a lot of his work. He's quite switched on. Degree in, I think it might be a master's in physiology and kinesiology, or maybe even exercise physiology.
Yep.
But he has, you can just go to bengreenfield.com for all his articles, but he's brought out this website called Kion. And it's his, I don't know if it's a private company or if it's like a group, but basically it's his answer to these questions, like how do you live healthier, how do you live longer, how do you live happier, and how they're all linked. I'll show you one of these. One of these articles for longevity. It quickly summarizes like the key areas. Yeah, basically it's a lifestyle that you need to adopt. It all depends on your goals. Everyone's going to have different goals. So if you just want to look better, well, you can do it through diet. If you want to feel better and look better, well, you diet and exercise.
Yeah.
But if you want to like look better, feel better, be able to move better,
Be healthier,
then it's like a whole lifestyle. You got to really change the way you choose to interact with social media, email, stress.
And honestly, I think a lot of people probably, they just want to look better.
Well, yeah, a lot of people just want to look good naked, as the saying goes.
Yeah, pretty much.
But yeah,
which is fair enough.
If you just want to look better, look at your diet.
Pretty much.
If you want to be
and exercise to an extent as well, because if you just diet, you won't build up muscle mass, for instance. If you're a man, for
not necessarily. It depends. Unfortunately, a lot of Western society is sedentary, so you need
to exercise anyway.
Yeah, because the amount of food you'd be eating if you weren't would be so small. Your body's natural cravings for not just individual foods, but the volume that you've been used to eating, you wouldn't be able to handle eating like 3 grapes and a block of cheese. Or like a box of dry biscuits and that's your lunch.
And it's the other thing as well is there's a lot of people who always talk about like, well, some fairly skinny people, they just never gain weight. They eat all the time. Chances are they're exercising more than you, and they're probably eating less than you.
Yeah.
There was actually a show on TV the other night. It was based from the UK. I assume it was probably a BBC documentary. I'm not entirely sure.
Yep.
But they followed 2 people who were skinny, and they saw themselves as skinny, and they're like, "Oh, we never gain weight. Like we eat whatever we want. Like I work a desk job. I never move." But they followed them and they filmed them, and the guy, he always had home cooked shit. He never got takeaway.
Yep.
He would eat like a packet of biscuits a day or something, but the biscuits he was buying were low in salt. They were like pretty much the healthiest biscuits you could possibly get. And he didn't do that purposefully. They were just the ones he got.
Yeah.
And every week he did 2 hours of Krav Maga.
Yeah.
But he was like, he didn't see that as like, he goes, yeah, that's just normal.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And the woman was similar. She taught like dancing to children or something. It's like really young children. So she was moving around all the time. And both of them, when they were sitting at their desk, they would fidget and move around at their desk.
Yeah.
And it's things like that. And as far as the amount they actually ate, they didn't eat much.
Yeah.
Like you have a lot of people who believe that, like they have the perception that, oh yeah, I'm eating the same as everyone else, but they're not.
No, a lot. Like I've suffered this. It's not until if you start tracking it with a diary,
have to actually write down things that you're doing.
Or like an app, like MyFitnessPal, great app. When you start tracking it and you are actually honest and you are diligent in tracking everything, just for like one day, you'd be surprised at how much like extra, like even just. You might be thinking you're having a smaller portion size than you are, which is one way, but a lot of people don't even register. They might have like...
They'll have like a Tim Tam and won't even think about it.
It's exactly, they have breakfast, lunch and dinner, but they won't even register the morning tea snack or the afternoon snack which they eat.
They forget about it. It's
They
like food
completely
amnesia.
forget it, and like, I ate healthy today, and then if you tracked everything
Mm-hmm.
and you look back at your diet and you're like, oh, where do those 4 Tim Tams come from?
Yeah.
Where do those...
I'm pretty sure Tim Tams are like Australia specific. They're like the best biscuits in the world.
Where do those 3 Lamingtons come from?
Yeah, exactly.
Also another Australian delicacy. But that's a that's a big problem that people face.
Mm-hmm.
They're just not honest.
Pretty much.
But it's a slow thing. It's not like it happens instantaneously. It's a slow, like you start here at X and then you slowly move away over like days, weeks, months, years, and a couple years down the track you're here at Y.
Mm-hmm.
But then when you look at the difference, it can be massive.
Yeah. Well, I think that see, I'm still overweight by like probably... I'm 6 foot, so I probably should be like 80 kilos, right? That's about 80 to 85.
If you go off the BMI, technically, if you're
I think 75 to 85, something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So
But I'm pretty bulky as far as muscles, so I would say probably 80 to 85.
But it depends, because the BMI, even though it's good for longevity, you could technically be like a bodybuilder.
Well, bodybuilders are all technically obese to the BMI, aren't they?
Exactly, they are.
Yeah.
But then, which is true, and doesn't mean they're not fit.
Mm.
But I don't know if anyone's had a study into the longevity of bodybuilders, if they've maintained that weight, even at that body percentage, if that's going to actually be healthy for long term.
Yeah, indeed.
You don't know.
But see, because I need to lose like between 10 and 20 kilos, probably about 10 to 15 kilos, I would say, to be like where I should be.
Yeah.
But
see, we could do that before Christmas.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. Like, I was in Japan, right? And I was fatter before I went to Japan.
Yeah.
I was there for not even 2 weeks, just under 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I lost 10 kilos. And that was the only reason I was eating shitloads when I was there, just as much as I would eat here. It's just that I was walking everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'm so sedentary when I'm here. I move around at work.
Yeah.
And otherwise I don't.
To get you a walking desk. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
The standing desk with the treadmill underneath. They're pretty cool. I'd like one of those.
You power your computer off a trip.
Yeah, it's another discussion about making like a healthy work environment.
Yeah. Well, if I sit at my desk all day, and like half the time I don't even sit at my desk, I'll sit there and I'll put my fucking feet up. I'm not even sitting. I'm lying essentially.
But that's not necessarily a bad thing, from what I've read.
Not necessarily, but when if you're doing that for 12 hours a day most days,
if that's all you're doing, like the idea for if you were to be a healthy mover, you can lie near a desk, but then you'd want to in an hour or two shift to like standing, then shift to like kneeling, then shift back to sitting.
I mean, even if just after a couple of hours you get up and walk around for a couple of minutes and then go back, that's still better than just not moving for huge chunks of time.
Everyone thinks they're going to have to be like an Olympic athlete or like Arnie if they want to be like fit and healthy. I'm like, no, it's not true. You can just change basic things.
Tiny things even. A few tiny things cumulatively can do a huge amount.
Better off starting. Make it easy because you want to hit those goals.
Yeah, that's a problem.
And build that momentum because
if you try and change 100% immediately, it's not going to work because you'll give up.
No,
not necessarily, but most people will.
That only works for certain people, and that usually comes out of a crucible moment where something's happened. Say it's like they've had some.
Your father dies of a heart attack or something.
Your father dies, or they've had a physical scare, or they've gone out and they've done some sort of challenge and they realise how shit they were, or the challenge they had to do was such an ordeal that it forced them to keep pushing. Then they realise that they're capable of so much more. But if that's not you, then doing it slower is a lot better. Yeah. Set yourself up for success.
The average person, it's a lot easier to make smaller changes over and over and over again until you get to the point where you want to be, as opposed to trying to do everything at once. It's the same principle as trying to quit cold turkey from smoking. There's a few people who can do it, but not many.
Yeah, there's a saying, you have to get comfortable being uncomfortable. Pretty much. And once you have that understanding, like that mindset and that desire to be that, then you'll be okay. But it can take doing that consistently. Doing all those things consistently that's what's going to save you. It's just being consistent, chipping away, Like, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? That thing.
Yep.
Slowly doing it.
Well, you won't lose weight if you eat an elephant.
Well, you could.
Well, I guess.
If you only ate like 1 square a day.
Yeah, but how long before an elephant goes off?
Well, if you put it in like a
Or a
smoker. Smoker,
I
make it
guess.
like jerky.
Elephant jerky. I bet you can buy elephant jerky. That must be a thing, right?
Probably could. Have you
Actually,
been,
no, they're endangered, right?
Have you been?
You'll get to buy elephant jerky.
Have you been to the Jerky House?
No.
So you know Burke Street, and then you got Chinatown. There's
Mhm.
like a little side like connection
Interesting. I'll have to have a look.
alley, but
Because I love jerky.
it's right next to China Red.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Jerky House.
Why not Burke Street?
Well, it's not on Burke Street, but China Red's in that. Like,
Oh, in that strip. That
what do you call it?
that-
Would you call it like a
An arcade.
arcade?
Yeah. Yep. I know what you're talking about.
But
In there.
yeah. So I think they've got a mix, and they have like turkey, pork.
Mm-hmm.
If you're into that type of thing, turkey, pork, possibly emu, crocodile.
Oh, yeah. There was a place. There's like an online place from America that does like a bunch of really cool flavored jerky. I can't remember what they're called. Savage Jerky, I think.
Savage jerky.
But they do a lot of sponsorships and things. Is the only reason I know about them. I think they're an American company. But they have buffalo jerky,
Okay.
which I think is technically bison
I believe so.
because it'll be from America. And I
Is
don't
it-
think the bison are technically buffalo. They're a different species. But they were called buffalo originally.
Oh, I don't know.
I think that was the thing, because I think, strictly speaking, buffalo are like the African animal is a buffalo. And in America they call them buffalo, but they're technically bison, which is a different breed. Very similar, but different, I think.
Not sure.
But we've been going for a while, eh?
Yeah, I was going to show you a couple things.
Sounds good?
Have you heard of your death clock?
No.
Where it's a clock that counts down to the time
You
gonna
die.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have heard of that, actually.
The concept is basically...
You answer a questionnaire, right, and then it gives you an estimated
Well,
time
you
of death,
can do
right?
that way. It's supposed to help motivate you and make you
Try and live healthier.
not live healthy, but refine your decisions. It's more about like how you choose to spend your time.
Yep.
So it makes you more conscious in how each decision you make can affect your overall life.
Yep.
Apple brought out this thing called the Life Clock,
Right.
which it connects to their health app, which is connected to your Apple Watch.
Right.
So based off it takes like your heart rate and then other like your calories,
I see.
your weight. But what it does is it'll have like a countdown timer. So you have X amount of years, months, days, hours, minutes, and seconds left before you're expected to die. But obviously you could die before or after. You never know. But if you were to live to the average age, if you're lucky enough to live to the average,
based on your health
based on
and
like
stuff like that.
your health markers, then that would be the time.
Yep.
Good thing about this app is then if you, it's like this example, if you've only slept for 5 hours, it will minus off
25 minutes.
time from your
Yep.
clock. But then if you're
doing something particularly healthy, it'll add
if you're
time back on.
active, it'll add on time.
Yeah, that's kind of cool.
But
It's a novelty, but it's a fun novelty. I can see the kind of cool aspect of it for motivational purposes.
yeah. So Android don't actually have an app, so to speak, like this.
There's probably one you can find, but it won't be as integrated.
They just have a countdown timer. So
Yeah.
you'd have to, from what I found, you just do it like your own. Use like a questionnaire you find at Google to give you a rough estimation.
Yeah, I remember them being a thing a while ago. It was like
They're not very accurate though.
no, they're kind of almost a joke type thing, but it's done off a simple algorithm of what answers you give to the questions, I think.
Yeah.
But I remember I was saying before, there was an IT Crowd, which is a British TV show. It was based off the idea of a death clock, where it was like, oh, this fun thing, we'll do the death clock. And then I think Roy was like, no, I don't want to know. He goes, well, I've just done it.
Yep.
Well, alright then, when does it say I'm going to die? You don't want to know. What was it say I'm going to die in 3 weeks or something? Last Tuesday.
But it would be very scary if you like look at a clock and then, well, look at this type of clock and then you realize, oh, I've only got X amount of hours left.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it would be interesting. So I'll see how the next week or two goes using it. So I've loaded an app.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few different ones. There's a really basic one,
Yep.
Life Countdown.
It's like give it to you in like a billion seconds. Was that what that was?
So
Wow.
it gives you blocks.
That's terrifying.
Yeah, so it shows what you've already used, the blue's what you're at, and then the red's what's left.
What are they separated into?
I assume they're years.
Years?
So based
That
off the
would make
questionnaires
sense.
I've done, the average score is 92.
Fair enough.
I'm planning
So
to.
it
My
reckons
plan's
what you're gonna
150, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
So I reckon you're going to live for what? 1,999,063. No. 1,999,063,253 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second.
Yeah, but if you look at the days, it's only 23,000 days.
Yeah.
If you think of it that way, that's not much.
It doesn't sound like much. So 3,000 weeks.
So this other one, which is called Life Clock, this is from the Android store.
Mm-hmm.
So this one's, that's like my current age.
Mm-hmm.
Then you feel the death one. That's
Slowly draining.
it's slowly draining. It's very like depressing. It's like a black screen. We'll add a link to it, but it shows. But I don't know where they get these averages from. But based off their averages, it predicts that
How long you're going to make love, how many meals
Yeah.
you're going to eat,
how many
enjoy
vacations.
how many weekends.
But it says here only 3,342 weekends left in my entire life.
Yeah, that's depressing.
That's fucking depressing, isn't it?
Yeah, kind of. When you think about it that way, don't it?
Because when you think about like if you're in a, depending on the type of job you're in, you can be in a job which you don't necessarily hate, but you're doing it because it's a good pay.
Yeah.
And you
Well,
almost live for the weekend, but then if you think like I've only got 3,400
Yeah, I know.
weekends left.
But at the same time, if you're
Scary
working a good
shit.
job with better pay, surely the idea is that you can retire earlier than if you're in a shit job with a good job with shit pay.
Yeah, but then how much do you put off to the like later half of life?
That's true.
Because if you're constantly like trying to do everything in your power to make yourself healthy,
Mm-hmm.
well then I can sort of understand investing in your future.
Yep.
But at some point, investing in your future is going to be the reward.
Well, there's some things that you should do when you're young if you're ever going to do them.
Well,
Bungee
exactly.
jumping, for instance. If you do
Bungee
that, if you do that,
jumping.
if you do that after the age of about 27, I think it does permanent damage to your retinas that just will never be fixed.
Yeah. But then I've
So
heard
I've got a
that.
year to go bungee. Not even.
I can't. I'm too old now.
I've got like.
I'm
a
an
couple
old
months.
man.
Shit, let's go bungee jumping.
So this will be interesting to see how if it changes my outlook in the next couple of weeks.
Yep.
My plan is I'm going to load a countdown timer and put it on my Garmin,
Mm-hmm.
digital Garmin. And just have a countdown. So who
Somewhat
knows?
morbid, but hilarious.
It is
nonetheless.
well. It is pretty morbid,
It's interesting.
but I'm happy to do it because it's sort of.
Motivational.
Yeah, it's. I think for me, because I'm more optimistic, I would see it as, okay, let's make the most use of this time.
Yep.
And because I've been reading, the Daily Stoic book by Ryan Holiday.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I got it on Amazon. If I can find my Amazon app. it's based around Stoic philosophy. Stoicism. And it breaks it down into 366 meditations. So for every day, including a leap year.
Oh yeah.
So you go to like today's, and then you can read what today's is.
Interesting.
It's actually I'll actually look up today's. See if I can find it. We are in June
What is
the
the
18th.
19th.
Okay. So this has it'll give you an actual writing, too far, from someone like Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus or
Mm-hmm.
another Stoic, and then it'll have like a rough, more modern translation because sometimes
A lot of the older stuff is.
it's a bit hard to grapple if
it's
you're not
hard to go
used.
through.
If you're not
Yeah.
used to it, so today is what, the 19th?
Yep.
So today's is stay focused on the present. Says, this is the traditional, it's from Marcus Aurelius Meditations. I've got his book.
Yep.
I started reading his book first, the Penguin one, those penguins, you know, the penguin books with the orange covers. They're like
Yeah.
super cheap, like $9. Really good classic books. Whoever wrote that translation did a great job of keeping the original feel and structure. I sometimes get lost in like, you have to concentrate, or for me, I find I have to concentrate quite intensely to try and understand what's been said.
Yep.
But
that's true of a lot of the older books, particularly things that were written in either Old English or Old French, because it's hard to Old French that has been translated to English, because it's very hard to put them into a modern language and still keep the correct
subtext.
Yeah, it's difficult.
General meaning. Well, today's is don't let your reflection on the whole sweep. Don't let your reflection on the whole sweep of life crush you. Don't fill your mind with all the bad things that might happen. Stay focused on the present situation and ask yourself, why is it so unbearable and can't be survived?
Be optimistic, essentially, and focus on what you can change immediately if you're not.
Yeah, and then they'll have
idea.
like
an explanation
of
how what that means and how they think about it. Yeah, it's a good idea.
It's actually a good book.
Although I will say something on the concept of old books. I do love the Sherlock Holmes books used with the word ejaculated, because he uses it all the time to mean like espoused, like he yelled. But there's like a brilliant line where it comes out, and Watson ran and ejaculated to Holmes out the window. Which is ridiculous, but hilarious nonetheless.
I wonder if people just get the first editions just for that reason. So
well, you never know.
Giggle.
It's just this brilliant line. As Holmes ejaculated out the window. It's just.
But I think a life clock or a death clock is something that suits stoicism.
To a degree.
It definitely shows.
Because it's implying that you have a kind of acceptance of how your life is, and you want to better it and make the most of it.
You're not going to live forever, so don't
waste.
Don't piss fart around.
Pretty much, yeah.
It's a good
I'm pretty sure that's an Australian saying.
Real Australian, don't piss fart around.
Don't piss fart around, mate.
All right.
Stop piss farting around.
I think that's a good place to
wrap it up.
So I'll come back to you guys with my little test. See what happens.
See if his death clock goes down to 3 days.
Might be a wise old sage.
No, you never know.
I doubt it.
Shit, we've been recording for 2 hours.
Yeah, it's a good time. All right.
Sounds good.
See you
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.